my name is Ayaka. I am a TA with Steve on the LSAT Unplugged. Awesome presentation to Jack. I think that was one of the best LRs that I've seen in a while. Not that I've attended a lot recently. Hi, Elizabeth. Alyssa is also here. She ran the essay writing admissions session last week. So she is also here helping me out, and she'll pop in here and there. Hi, Alyssa. Lovely to see some familiar faces and also some new faces. So very good to see you all. So let's get started. Today I want to talk about editing your personal statement / diversity statement / any sort of essay that you have for your application. We've done a lot of talking about, how to pick a topic, how to write that first draft. Alyssa did a wonderful meditation last week and talked through how to just get in the mindset of starting to write your essay. So today I would love to talk about how to start editing that essay. Editing an essay, a lot of times we're like, oh, just write that first draft and you've gotten like that big portion of your essay done. But actually that's really that first step. And editing your essay can be this daunting task that we don't really have a lot of guidance on how to do. So I would love to just kind of talk through that and give you some easy tips and tricks on how to do it. So Anna here has dropped the link to the presentation I will be presenting today, and I will share my screen. Give me 1 second. Thank you, Anna, for dropping the link. Here we go. You guys can all see my screen. Here, let me get us out of there. Just 1 second while I pull up the chat. Alrighty, and please, if you have any questions, comments, anything at all, feel free to drop it in the chat. All right, so editing your essay. Just a little bit of recap. Your personal statement really should have these sort of big things. I know they're big buckets of things, but these are the big things that you want in your essay. Big why, there's overall message, you have a structure to your essay, you have style, tone. I hope you have words in your essay because that's really what an essay is made out of. So you have all these things that are in your personal statement, diversity statement, addendum, all of that fun stuff. Where to start editing? I say from the top down. You could theoretically go bottom up from style to word choice and then structure and big why. However, I do think that you might be doing more work than necessary. So I do like to say, let's start editing from this big overall message that you have in your essay to your structure, how that essay is structured, what are the paragraphs doing, what are the sentences doing, and then to the style, tone, and word choice. Are they all working towards that big message? So that's how I like to look at it. Some people, I do understand if you're like, I really like working on word choice because that will get the ball rolling to start thinking about how you want to phrase your big why. I think that's great. Whatever will get you started. But I think in general, going from the big why is better than going bottom up. And what I like to do in a first pass in editing an essay is think about clarity. Is there clarity in the essay? And I think I'm going to flip back and forth a little bit here. Clarity means very different things in these 3 tiers of an essay. So kind of digging a little bit deeper into that. Clarity is all what we want to get to. And clarity for big overall structure and message. Is it clear? Is it a concise message? If 100 people read your essay, well, 99 people get it. I don't want to say 100 because you always get that one person who might take it very differently. But will 99% of people understand and get what you're trying to say. With the structure, does the structure of the essay make sense? Is it a cohesive story? Oftentimes when we're writing that first draft or multiple drafts, you get floater paragraphs. They're like, you don't really know why it's there, but it's been there. So you're kind of reluctant to cut it. Are there any of those, right? And then when you come to word choice, are you using any jargon? Are you using vague vocabulary? You know, are there weird words that you use out of habit? Those are the things that we really want to be thinking about when we talk about clarity. So digging one step further, I like to, when I go through an essay and edit, I personally like to ask a lot of questions. So, and when you're editing your own essay, it might be really hard to be like, oh, I know exactly where I need to edit. So in the form of questions can get you to the answer a little bit quicker and give you a little bit more clarity, in how to edit your essay. So with the big why, overall message clarity portion, I like to ask, where does your big why, overall message, come into your essay? And what I mean from that is a physical location. If your big why / overall message is coming in as the last sentence of your essay, I think that's a little bit too late. And a lot of times when I see that, people say, oh, it builds to that point. I think you have to think about the reader a little bit here. Admissions is reading 100 of these, maybe even more. And if you're going to string the admissions officer along for a page and a half to 2 pages just to get to your why, I think that's a little bit too late. You can bring it forward. So kind of look at the location of where that comes in. And second, is it clear? Is it an easy to understand message? And I don't think that a good message or good why or a good purpose needs to be easy to understand, but I think it should be understandable, right? So are you in a position where you feel like if somebody read your essay, you feel like you need to explain it, right? So we want to make sure that that message is very clear. And lastly, is it about you? Sometimes we end up writing an essay where you know more about someone else's experience than yourself. So is that essay about you, right? We want to, the admissions officer really wants to know who you are. So we don't want to end up writing about your cousin that, was falsely accused of X, Y, and Z, or, your friend that was in a terrible incident, right? Like that's important stories to tell, but we want to bring it back to you, right? At this point, do we have any questions? Looks good. All right. Next, we're going to talk about structure. So how do we start editing structure? I like to ask this question, even for my own essays, does the hook resonate with the rest of your essay? A lot of times, we're like, oh, I know how I'm going to start my essay. I have this great episode that I want to talk about, and I'm going to put it in as a hook, and I'm going to hook that reader in. Sometimes it has nothing to do with the overall message. It has nothing to do with where your essay is going. And it becomes this floating story that doesn't connect in any way to the rest of your essay. So we want to make sure, yes, that's a great point. Jocelyn, I don't have a checklist, but I can put it together. I can put all these questions together. Thanks. Yes. So you really want to make sure that that hook is, connecting to the story. Second, how does each paragraph function to get to the big message, right? If every paragraph isn't getting you there, then what is it doing in your essay? You really don't want to have random tangents and kind of shifts that aren't getting to the message. And then the third, it kind of echoes that second, but are there any tangents? And when I say tangents, I see this a lot of times when people are in their third or fourth rewrite of their essay, where there's something that was in their first draft they've forgotten about, but because we're so used to reading our drafts that we forget that it doesn't belong there or belong in our essay anymore. So for example, let's say you originally wanted to talk about, racial tensions in your community, and then you put something about your church, but then you decide, oh, that's really not the direction you want to go, but you have a line that's left over about church. Well, that could lead you down, that could be a tangent that you've forgotten about. So we want to make sure that we trim all those things down. So that's around structure. Any questions there? Alrighty. Lastly, we're getting to very, very specific parts about our essays, but clarity around vocab, style, tone, etc. So, and I say niche topic, those of you who have, been in these essay sessions for a while know the how to choose a topic session from a couple weeks ago. If you have a niche topic, especially for those people who have been working for a long time or working for any amount of time, and there's some vocabulary that is unique to that industry, we forget. So we forget that not everyone knows what those words mean or the context of the words. So you might be used to using certain jargon, and we want to catch those in your essay. These admissions officers are not, we don't know what kind of expertise they have, right? You may get someone who used to be an engineer, who switched over to law, who is now an admissions officer, or you may get someone who's only done law and has become an admissions officer. We really don't know who you're going to get. So you really want to get rid of any jargon, explain out if it's necessary in your essay to understand the message. So really fish for that. And I do suggest asking someone who is not in your field to read your essay to see if you're missing any of that. Word choice that may be extreme or really, really weak. You don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist off the wall, like bouncing off the wall. Like you really want to not moderate language, but you don't want to go way, way too extreme. Word choices that may be vague, and I have a little bit of a point here afterwards, so we'll come back to that. And the last thing is, does the essay sound like you? I've come across essays where there's people who use colorful language, beautiful phrasing, but when they write, it just doesn't sound like that person, and I can't hear their voice in the essay. And I think the most beautiful essays and the most expressive essays is ones where you can sort of hear the person kind of telling you this story, especially in a personal statement. So you want to make sure that you hear the voice, and that's something that's going to come out the more that you rewrite and write and kind of edit that essay. How do I know what is too casual, too formal, especially if I'm not in the practice of writing for academic reasons? Great question, Alyssa. I think number one, we don't want to be using conjunctions in written essays. I think for me, that was something that was ingrained in me for writing. You do not use conjunctions, and this is a formal written thing, so we don't want to do that. The other is I have a very loose idea because I love hearing people's voices in an essay. I think as long as you're not getting into slang for slang purpose, I think we're okay. Colloquial phrasing is something that we need to be careful of. Something like let's do something, or let's, stuff like that just gets a little bit too casual. But I don't think you need to go as far as formal writing where you're losing the meaning of a sentence, or the message. Hope that answers that question, Alyssa. Awesome. Alrighty. So short tangent about vague vocab. What does it mean to be vague? And I think these words are really common, and I see this a lot in people's writing. Words like unique, significant, special, those it sounds good. Colloquially, when we speak, we use a lot of these words, right? Because they sound good. They're hefty words. However, unique doesn't mean anything except for one of a kind. But we want to know one of a kind how, right? One of a kind in what way? Significant, if you really think about it, doesn't really mean anything. Significant in what way? How? And so we want more than just these words. So I like to say there are better words and expressions that should express and specify what we're trying to say. If one of the quick and dirty things that I like to do in editing an essay is underline these words and say, explain what you mean by that. Because it's in the explanation that we're getting more of who you are. And yes, Jocelyn, exactly. Stay away from that bland language. We want to see who you are, and you're more than unique. You're more than significant. You're more than special. Show me who you are. All right. So, yes. So if you're like, you don't even know where to start editing, and you're like, okay, I just want to start small, I would really take a pen, go through your essay, see if you use any of these words, and see if you can explain out any of what you're trying to say. Because a lot of times we think we're saying what we mean to say, and we're falling short. A lot of times the deeper stuff, the more meatier stuff, takes a lot more words to say than we think it needs. So I would start there if you're like, I have no idea where to start. So that's the information that I will be spewing today. At this point, are there any questions? Alrighty. So I have a little bit of a fun / sort of embarrassing activity. I am pulling my personal statement from a couple months ago. So this is a couple drafts ago. And we will look at like one paragraph of this and see if we can quote unquote edit together what part of my essay. And no fear, this essay has been edited. Alyssa, it will look familiar to you. But you will see that even some of these really simple basic stuff applies in a draft that I've written a couple months ago. So here we go. I'm just gonna first start off with the first paragraph. We probably won't get to like the big message, but we'll start there. So hold on, let me see if I can make it bigger just so I can see it. All right. My phone jerked me awake. As much as I was angry that I had to wake up, I knew that a phone call at 2 a.m. meant one thing. There was a major cyber breach at a client site. This was the start to a long week of continuous all day and night meetings trying to get our bearings around a worldwide ransomware attack. At the time, being located in Tokyo and translated for executive meetings with enterprise clients who had suspected breaches of ransomware during the day. At night, I worked with the technology and intelligence teams and cyber analysts in the US to understand what the attack actually was and what our response would be. All right. That was the first opening to my draft from November. Okay. So right here, what questions can we ask to start editing this first paragraph? Or do we want to read a second paragraph to this? Awesome. All right. What questions can we ask ourselves or myself, my past self? Is this how I sound? Yeah, that's actually a really good one. Personally speaking, that was really hard for me to read. Because I don't feel like it sounded like me. And I think that's a good checkpoint.
With you answering that question, how would you have edited it to make it sound more like you? Like, would it be like adding more details, or what would you have added?
I really had a really hard time reading. Oh shoot! This last half, like the during the day and at night part. So I would kind of restructure those sentences. I also think there's a lack of clarity about what I'm trying to say, and it's almost like I'm using too many words to say what I want to say.
I was just going to say the same thing. I think that when I read, I'm not you, Ayaka, but even this third sentence, when I read, this was the start to a long week of continuous all day and night. That sentence is really hard to get through because of just this sheer amount of syllables. And I think it's interesting that you bring up the question of like, what do I need to add? Because so many times I see in essays, a lot needs to be taken out. And that's exactly what Ayaka said too. But I would figure out how to say it in less words with more clarity.
I love that. Alyssa, you know me. I love shaving down stuff and saying let's cut out everything that we don't need. I agree. I mean, this sentence, I stumbled my way through it reading it out loud, right? Again, there's a lack of grammar here as well. But if you look at it, there's so much information packed here. And that was my sort of intent in the very beginning of this essay was like, okay, I need to set up that I was in Tokyo. I need to set up the fact that, we were getting ransomware attack. And let me highlight here for you. This really is kind of jargon almost. Ransomware attack. What does that mean? Who does that affect? What is a cyber breach, right? Enterprise clients. those are jargon words that I was really used to in the industry that I was in. Technology and intelligence teams, cyber analysts. These are all things I'm used to, and I know, and people in my industry, if I say, oh, a cyber analyst, people know exactly what they mean, but a random person won't understand that. So even in the first paragraph, I have so much jargon that I need to explain out if I really wanted someone to understand this paragraph. Sounds like you're really good at your job, but that you're not able to pull that out. Yeah, exactly. I can't take what I know and put it into plain words, right? It's almost like you have to be at my level to understand what I'm saying, which is not a good attitude to have when you're writing your personal essay. You really want everyone to understand. So again, even in this first paragraph, I'm lacking clarity as to the what I'm trying to get across in this essay. It might make sense to me, but it doesn't make sense to a majority of people. And if our threshold is 99%, then I'm not doing my job well here.
I'm totally jumping in because I am being reminded of a few flashbacks of my first drafts of personal statements. And it took a few drafts. I have a history of being a professional dancer, and I had written a paragraph of how I became a soloist. And I wrote this next paragraph about how I became a principal. And I was hashing it out with two very close LSAT friends, and it took us like an hour in before I realized that they didn't realize that those two words were like really special and like actually meant stuff. And I was like, what do you mean you don't know what a principal is? Like, that's the ballerina in the middle. Like, what are you talking about? And it was this, I was actually so, I don't want to say humiliated, but it was a huge learning lesson for me in terms of that. And on another point, I'm kind of going on another tangent, which I was listening recently to a podcast about admissions, and you're hitting the nail on the head in terms of what they were mentioning in this first paragraph. Shakira saying, I didn't know that. And I taught my students about Misty Copeland. Yeah, she's a principal. Misty's a principal. So, but going off on a tangent in terms of like talking about your work, which is absolutely, I think, a fantastic topic. It's absolutely a great topic. But somebody brought up in this podcast to be careful not to talk about you doing your job. If you're just doing your job, that's not what makes you special. And I'm saying that with so much humility because Ayaka, you are so cool. And everybody, if you're talking about I'm doing my job and it fits within the parameters of what your job's expectations are, that's not the greatest angle for your personal statement. It's sort of your thought process about it, or how can you tell us about that. A really good lawyer can take a lot of information and be able to present it in an effective way. And so that's all of that being said, this paragraph is reminding me of that.
Wow, that's great points that you made there. And I think a lot of times we're, especially people who have had a lot of work experience and that's informed their decision to go to law school, it's really tempting to kind of talk about one time during work, but it's almost like, yeah, that's what's expected during your job, or what the day-to-day is in your job. And so that becomes the story more than what your journey and what your growth is coming out of your job. So love it. Yes, absolutely. And going back to the point about a hook. So for me, when I started writing my personal statement, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that time. It was so stressful. It was like the defining moment in my cybersecurity career of this worldwide ransomware attack. I went to the Ministry of Defense. I had to help all our executives who came from the US to talk to the Ministry of Defense, and that's what I'm going to talk about. And I was like, yes, this is going to be a real sexy story. In writing, it looks like this, right? And it's not, it doesn't make any, well, I don't want to say it doesn't make any sense, but it's like in writing, it's hard to kind of put that down into words that make sense, that is understood by everyone. So a lot of times you're in that mindset of, oh, I need a really compelling hook that's going to catch everyone's eye, and it ends up like this. So not to say that you shouldn't have a hook, not to say that, you know, your hook is going to be bad. It's more that write it out, see how it connects to your story, and then let's edit, right? It's all a process.
Ayaka, you're reminding me of this great piece of advice that you gave me when you and I were just talking, and you said to me that sometimes the first time you read my essay, you asked me if I had meant to do this sort of like very interesting structure and style of the way I was writing, and I did, and you very nicely kind of let me know that it wasn't really working. And I think that you just taught me that just this week that sometimes we're trying, maybe as a writer, I know I was trying to be compelling and I was trying to make these stylistic complex choices, but I didn't have a focused plumb line that I started with, and it didn't land. And it's really hard to land complex structure like the first few rounds. It's or you know, and it's not even technically necessary. So that's what you've been telling me, and I wanted everyone to hear.
Thanks for reminding me of my own advice, Alyssa, and thank you for kind of sharing that. I think, as for me, I'm not a professional writer. I do love writing, and I do write in my private life. However, doing complex structure, doing complex essay work is really difficult, especially when you only have 2 pages double spaced. I think it's really hard to do. Really good writers can get it done, and it's absolutely beautiful. But I think, going back to the presentation I gave earlier in the class, I think we really need to be clear and give clarity much more often than we give lovely structure and lovely style and all of that, because your message can get lost if you're too concerned about the bells and whistles. So not to like focus so much on my essay, but just coming back and going to that second paragraph, just quickly reading through after that first tragic paragraph. When I started as an executive assistant and translator at the Tokyo location of FireEye, I had no knowledge of cybersecurity. I remember many meetings where the terminology, concepts, and technology blew over my head, but I refused to be just confused. I wanted to know, understand, and actively participate in creating solutions for clients to protect against cyber attacks. In my first weeks, I took home a stack of books on cybersecurity, intelligence reports on past and expected future attacks, and reached out to anyone I could that could help me understand the field, market, and business. The technology was the hardest to understand. The technical aspects were difficult, but studying for hours at night, by a month in, I could speak to east-west attack patterns, intel analysis, and the life cycle of a cyber attack, and effectively speak to the technology and the business in both English and Japanese. My curiosity and hunger to know more about the field grew. I absorbed the latest cyber intelligence reports that the company generated to ensure that the people I was supporting had the latest information when speaking to clients. All right. Another kind of solid paragraph in terms of information, but tragic in terms of clarity. So anyone out there, like, ding, 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 red flag, this needs to be changed. I mean, jargon is big here.
I think it's similar to like what was already said about the first paragraph. Like, I'm not in that industry at all. So as I'm reading it, I feel like I need a little bit more clarity in some of the terminologies that you used, like east-west attack patterns. Sounds cool, though.
Great. Thank you for that point. Yes, absolutely. It's like, what does that even mean, right? Like, I don't explain any of that. What is intel analysis? What does that entail? Um, Let me see. There's more. Oh shoot. Life cycle of a cyber attack, right? Um, all this, right? So great point. I think there's a lot of jargon here. Um, and I think there's two ways to take that. First is to completely take it out, right? I could just go about my day and say, I could speak to almost every significant attack that has happened in the last decade, right? That's easy to understand vocabulary. Um, the other way to take it would be to explain it out, right? Explain kind of, if I were to explain East and West attack patterns, it would take a whole 3 pages single space. So I don't really want to do that. But, kind of maybe explain a life cycle of a cyber attack, right? And kind of talk the reader through in very simple terms what that means. But don't just stop there. I would need to say like how that information informs my job and makes me better or informs my experience, right? So you could take it as a metaphor, you could take it as, I could take it to like a very metaphorical like life cycle of a cyber attack. It happens over and over again, and so I can see the cyclical blah blah, like it gets into a very complex structure. But you could take it in that way. I don't think identifying jargon means just take it out, because then you're getting to a point of like, what is this essay about? But there's different ways to deal with jargon. The other big thing here for me is there's a convoluted message of this essay of where I start talking about, I was an executive assistant and a translator. And this is actually real. So I was translating for a executive based in Japan. He didn't speak a lick of English. So everything got translated. This was an American company, and it was a Japanese executive who needed everything translated. So there's this convolution between translation, which is here, right? And understanding technology, right? Terminology, concepts, and technology, right? So this paragraph is mixing the two together in a way that when I sit back and read it again, I'm like, okay, what, I don't understand what is going on in this paragraph. I get that she was studying and she had to absorb a lot of information, but the translation part, the technology part, it's here and there and it's a little confusing. All right. So that's kind of where I'm like, okay, maybe this paragraph needs to be split. It could either be split to talk about the learning and then the language part, or we drop the language part, right? I think there's a lot of things to consider here, but a lot of times we're trying to say too much with too little words, and we need to split it.
You totally just took the words out of my mouth, Ayaka, when you were like this sentence that you highlighted, like I could speak to east-west attack patterns, intel analysis, and the life cycle of a cyber attack. definitely an awesome flex. I love the flex on essays. Everybody should do them. There's also ways to integrate humility and thoughtfulness and empathy and a lot of other things in there. But I agree with you. Part of me wonders why you would go into telling me more about your job and how you can kind of tell me more about like this next chapter in your life. So I was just about to say the same thing.
Yeah. And almost, I mean, exactly, right? Like, this is part of my job. I don't really need to tell them how I do my job. The other part to it is like this random, this is a floater, to be honest, is like understanding the field, market, and business. I don't bring up market or business anywhere else. So it really floats in that essay, right? So, or in this paragraph. Does this need to be here? I don't think so. Is it something that I need to treat in another paragraph? Maybe, but isn't understanding market and business like part of my job? Again, the same point that you, Alyssa, has made. You know, really probably not necessary. So that's something that I would probably cut. Other points, you know, this stylistically, I'm running out of colors. Let's see here, yellow. Stylistically, I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that sentence here. Also, this gets a little slang like, so I'm not a big fan of blue over my head. I would probably put that in a little bit more formal language, but not too formal here. So that, I feel like even reading, I didn't like the sound of it in my head or in my own voice. So I would probably go back, flag that, and say, stylistically, I think I need to change that. Yeah, so we've looked at 2 paragraphs in my past draft of an essay, and I hope that you guys saw how you can go in and kind of tweak parts of it. I know we didn't talk about the big why, big message part, but this is kind of how I like to go about editing. Are there any questions here? Big questions, or, you know, please bring up your own essay as well. Like, if you're like, well, I'm kind of stuck doing this with my essay, any questions out there?
I'm at like the drafting process of just like the essays in my head, so I'm just trying to get it into the paper. So just reading yours and like I've been looking into other examples of different essays and stuff. From my understanding, and I just want to get your and everyone else's input about this as well. Like the first paragraph is more like establishing like your personality and like how like is that like of course we can go more into it throughout the essay as well, but like should we like establish the why personality and like the storytelling element all in the first paragraph?
Great question. And I love how you put it, that the first paragraph establishes like your personality. I think that's a great way to put it. Um, I don't think it's the big message or the big why. Oftentimes it's the why law school message, but I don't think that needs to be in the first paragraph. But I would like to see it in, at least in the first half of your essay. Alyssa helped me find this in my own essay a couple drafts before this one, but she was like, your why comes in the second or the last third of your essay. And I think that, again, I agree with Alyssa there, is that that's a little bit too late. You want to see it, you know, kind of in the first couple paragraphs, so we have an idea of where you're going in your essay. So I don't think it needs to be in the first paragraph, and Alyssa, please jump in here, but at least in the first half.
I think it's a great question. And this is a sort of the type of question where it all just comes down to execution. There is not going to be just like there are different ways to greet people, and you can, give them like a head nod or maybe like shake someone's hand, and everyone's handshake is different. Like the personal statements are going to be different. I don't think there's a hard rule for the first paragraph. I think it's fantastic to have that like consciousness about what does this first paragraph do. But I've seen some really lovely essays that the essay again never is explicitly stating why. There it does need to answer why you would be a person to be interested, but it's my understanding that it's my understanding that if you can execute a story about yourself well, and it is executed incredibly like structurally, and it's a fantastic story, it could potentially answer the why just because of your core values, just because of who you are. I'm getting kind of like left field here, but I don't think there's a hard rule.
Yeah, Alyssa, you bring up a great point. We don't need to answer any sort of question about why law school or why a law career. The essay just needs to reflect who you are. And Alyssa, I love the phrase you use, paint a portrait of who you are. So I think in that, a lot of 90% of essays are going to answer the question why law school. And I don't know if yours goes that way, but even if not, um yeah, I agree with all the things that you said, Alyssa. And sorry, Tashin, am I saying your name correct?
It's Tashin.
Tashin, are you having any like difficulty putting your ideas down on paper?
I feel like there are just way too many directions that it's going. So I'm just trying to be a lot more concise and really gather the most important and meaningful information that needs to be shared. And I feel like I'm at the stage of like being far too overwhelmed, and I'm just trying to like try my best to like pick the best strategy. And I think that's what's holding me back the most right now. Cause like of course it's like the first draft, that's where I'm at. First draft is not going to be perfect, but then in my head I'm just like, oh, I just want it to be good.
Oh, I 100% feel that sentiment. We put a lot of pressure on that first draft, but I encourage you to just sort of sit and write, you know, all the stories, because, and it's unfortunate that, the personal statement's only 2 pages, double spaced, because we all are more than 2 pages double spaced, right? Our lives are not condensed to that. So I encourage you to kind of write all of the things that you want to write. And then I think, the questions you're asking, I can feel like you have a lot of stories to tell. So if you write it down on paper, it might just be a, exercise of picking and choosing which one's right for you after you write it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions here? Alrighty, well, I will give everyone 9 minutes back. Feel free to reach out, with any of your essay questions. Alyssa and I, we love essays. So, we're partnering off on these admissions sessions on Wednesday nights. Thanks, Jack, for staying. And yeah, we love answering essay questions, and we love looking at essays as well. So feel free to reach out to us. I'll drop an email here. And at some point in the future, we'll probably do like one of those essay workshops where we read through essays. So, whenever you have a draft ready, or if you're like, you want someone to read through yours, feel free to drop it in that email, and we'll probably collect them for a couple weeks and do an essay workshop in the near future.
Yeah, I was just thinking too that sometimes there will be links in, am I saying this right? Kajabi. There will be certain weeks that have links there for you to drop. And if the link's not there, you can send it to that email. I can't guarantee that if you send in your essay, we will be able to edit it or talk about it in class that week. It might happen that month. Most likely it'll definitely happen. It'll definitely happen. I can't tell you when. But if you feel that it's ready, drop it. But you're always welcome to kind of keep talking about it. And also you can always talk about it here. I know that Ayaka and I, it's really powerful to talk about your ideas. I know that Jocelyn and I got some wicked amount of work done just saying out loud. And it's definitely harder to talk about things and communicate things than it is to think about them in certain aspects. And it's the same thing with writing. So this is definitely a space to talk exactly about your essay, even if we're not editing it. So definitely do that.
Yeah. And, if you bring your essay, we can definitely do the same exercise we did here today. We can do, more brainstorming exercises. All of that is on the table. So reach out anytime. We're here every week. Yeah. Have a good night. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.